Welcome to New Life Live with Stephen Arterburn. For 35 years, New Life has been transforming lives one at a time thanks to the giving hearts of you, our listeners. Our goal is to provide you with wisdom from God's Word to give you hope and help in life's hardest places. If you have a question you'd like to ask today, our phone lines are open. Call 1-800-229-3000. That number again is 1-800-229-3000. Now here's today's host, Becky Brown.
Hello, everybody. We are so glad that you joined us today. And however you're listening, whether it's podcast, live radio, internet, whatever it is, we are just grateful that you're there because we know that you're interested in all things to have a new life, to have transformation in your life. Today, we're going to have Marc Cameron and Dr. Alice Benton joining us. And, I know, Alice, you always got 50 million things going through your mind, always thinking about things. But what would you like to share with us today?
Well, I want to speak particularly to our parents who are listening, but this applies to everyone, because if you're worried about your children being vulnerable to addiction, I'm going to share with you one of the most powerful ways to safeguard your home from being vulnerable to the risk of addiction. And screen addiction is one of the highest rising, most quickly increasing addictions of our time. And so we should be concerned about it. But there's very specific action that we can take to help protect our children against this. And really, research shows that about 1 in 4 of us is already at the level of problematic screen use, which is just one step underneath addictive screen use. So this applies to all of us. And as I work with families to help loosen that grip of screen addiction, I find that as parents learn how to feel and deal with their emotions, they learn it, they practice it themselves, and then they teach and model it to their children, the home environment becomes safe enough to come off screen. When there's high intensity in a home, digital escape is one of the routes kids take in order to feel safe from the parental intensity in the home. And so parents, as we do our own work and as we learn how to manage our own messy emotions, it makes it more inviting for children to live off screen more of the time. Digital coping can be really effective short term, but what we see long term is that when we're on screen for hours and hours per day, our cortisol levels stay really high, depression increases, anxiety increases, and people report that they feel more afraid to engage with other humans face to face. They want to do it all on screen, by text, by telehealth, by video conferencing, because we're not used to engaging with each other face to face. So it hamstrings us emotionally. Learning how to manage our emotions is one of the strongest interventions to help children come off screen.
Wow, that's a word we have not heard before, digital coping. Man, Marc, what would you say about that, digital coping?
I love what Alice is saying here. And, it's important for us to recognize that kids learn most through modeling. They learn most through watching what we are doing as parents. And I think sometimes as parents, we can get stuck in thinking that we've already given them the rules, or we've already given them the device, and so we can't really take it back. But we have something called parental prerogative, where you can go back to your kids and you can say, hey, you know what? I've made a mistake and I owe you an apology. I allowed you to do this, but I realized that this is not healthy for you. And since I've realized that, I'm going to be making the changes myself, but I'm also going to be having you make those changes too. Now, and kids listen up very, very well, especially when we go to kids and we say we need to confess something to them. Their ears prick up and they're listening. And that modeling, even if you get defensiveness, even if you get resistance at first, that modeling sinks deep, deep down.
And Steve and I have unpacked how to do this in our book, Understanding and Loving Your Child in a Screen-Saturated World.
Well, and I was thinking, Alice, about your book. If you're an adult and you don't have children who you're dealing with this, you still would benefit from reading this book because we are using digital coping. It's just, listen, you changed my thoughts about that. Oh. It just is amazing how much we turn to those screens. And you know what? You're missing all of life in front of you. If you need help, we'll help you with that. We'll send you a copy of Alice's book. Why don't you put your phone down for just a minute? Well, maybe don't put it down while you're listening to us. Maybe later. No, I'm just teasing. We'll be back taking calls after this.
My husband was involved with a pornography addiction. He was unfaithful. I called the wedding off. He stepped out on the marriage and ended up having a child.
The Restore Workshop is designed for a woman dealing with a man's sexual addiction issues.
My husband is a recovering sex addict. There were strip clubs, other ladies.
If you've been affected by betrayal, an emotional or physical affair, or pornography, the Restore Workshop will equip you with support and tools to help you through.
Restore has empowered me and has given me the tools to work through my anger, work through my pain, work through my confusion, and help me realize that I am worthy.
Being here and being surrounded by people who get it has given me my power back.
The Restore Workshop is coming to Orange County, California, February 24th through the 26th. To register or to find out more, call 1-800-NEW-LIFE or online at newlife.com.
Thank you, Restore. You have changed my life forever.
To find out more information about New Life or to order any of the resources mentioned on today's program, call 1-800-NEW-LIFE. Now back to New Life Live.
Welcome back. You're going to make me think about that for a while, Alice, and we'll be real mindful about our screens for the rest, at least for the rest of the hour. We're going to go to our calls and we're going to talk with Marcia, who's calling us from Los Angeles, listens on the internet. Even though I know we are dogging the internet right now, but listen, New Life is changing lives. So listen on the internet too, if you have to. Marcia, how can we help you today?
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call. Really quick question. A couple that is married, they both are remarried, and now they're married to each other. After reading the Bible, they discovered that they shouldn't have remarried, and they should have gone back and reconciled with their original spouses. Are they living in an adulterous state, and if so, should they just get a divorce?
Marcia, do you know why the original divorces took place?
No, I don't know.
I ask because there are two ways in which the Bible says divorce is not desirable for us because it creates so many problems, additional problems and pain. But it is permissible in two situations. It's permissible if our spouse has been unfaithful and is unwilling to reconcile, to change, to clean up. It's also permissible if there has been abandonment by an unbelieving spouse. And so in those circumstances, there's biblical permission. God still says it's not his best for us, but there is a biblical allowance, I would say, an allowance for divorce.
She's not sure if he committed adultery or not.
Well, Marcia, here's the thing, though. I don't know that adding to the problem by divorcing again and thinking that you're going to get back to the previous partner, I think that could be a challenge as well. But Marc, what would you say about this situation?
Yeah, so I think God wants us to be able to live in relationship with each other, and he outlines rules and guidelines and standards for us to live in relationship with each other. But if we get so stuck in the rules that we look past relationship, we're missing what God's best is for us. And so we've heard this question here before, and if you follow it by the letter of the law here, it could get really complicated, because what if somebody is now remarried and they've got kids? Should they then break up that family and go back to the spouse that they had 20 years ago because they've just had this new insight? I don't think that's really what Jesus was saying in that moment. Jesus was really protecting women. When he said the Lord God hates divorce, Moses allowed you to do that, but I say to you, do not divorce, stay together. Jesus was protecting women in that moment, because men could go ahead and divorce their wives if for frivolous things, if they didn't like what they made them for dinner or something like that. And women were second-class citizens at that time. They couldn't just go ahead and remarry somebody else because nobody would likely take them, and it's not like they could go out and have jobs and earn money and be independent like they can now. So Jesus was actually protecting women when he made that statement there. And so I think it's a good thing to think about here, but I wouldn't think that the most loving thing to do in this moment now is to break this new vow that they've created.
Yeah, she's not trying to go back to the old husband. She she just doesn't want the Lord to look at her as if she is in an adulterous state because she did not go back to her previous husband.
Well, and that's the message of the gospel here, right? That's the reason why Jesus came, to free us, not so that we could be bound by the law, but so that we could be free from our sin. And so once we confess that we've sinned and we accept Jesus, and then that blood covers us now.
So, Marcia, there are steps that your friend can take to address the sins that she has committed, and that's certainly by confessing, which it sounds like she's doing with you, and it's looking for what repair work might God be nudging her to do. So she might confess to her ex-husband, gosh, the way I went about this was all wrong, and I hurt you, and I can hear about it. You can tell me how I hurt you by the way I handled our divorce. If there were children involved, there's repair work to do there. And in some extreme cases, people do decide, gosh, by living in this remarriage, I think I am committing adultery. My conscience just won't let me rest with that. But I'd be really cautious about how to manage it. And I would probably do some counseling sessions first. I'd talk with my pastor first, because if we're compelled to act to divorce again, or we just living with that high level of guilt, it probably comes from an additional source apart from the Word. The Word should convict us, and we should look at, okay, how do I have to change my behavior because I'm not living within God's will? But we also have to differentiate between unhealthy guilt that might come from a person in our lives who is criticizing us for what we've done, but that's not necessarily gospel truth. And so I would cautiously look at all these different angles to figure out what is God asking of your friend to do the repair work that she can at this point.
I love that. And Marcia, one last thing. I want to encourage you to encourage them to work on their marriage. And they may not even be having difficulties in their marriage right now, but like you were just talking about, Alice, that false guilt can infect this current union. And we want this union to be very strong. And so, I hope that gives you some clarity. We're going to send you a copy of How We Love. We talk about this, a lot because like you said, Marc, we get this question a lot. People will get stuck on those rules and overlook the bigger picture. And God wants us to find redemption and life in our lives. And so I'm hoping that will help you.
Well,
Marcia.
and then just one final thought here too, even when you think about the union, right? When we make our marriage vows, we make this covenant to the other person in front of God. And so if you were to then break that marriage, now you're breaking another covenant, the new covenant to God.
Right. We hope that helps you, Marcia. You're a good friend for calling in. And if your friend needs a counselor to help in this situation, we've got counselors in your area that we can connect you with. We are going to go to our caller, Kay, who's calling us from Dallas, listens on Sirius XM. Hi, Kay. Thanks for calling. How can we help you today?
Hi there. Many thanks for taking my calls today. I am the classic latchkey kid from the 70s and 80s. My parents were divorced when I was 4, and I have 3 siblings that are 10 years plus older than myself. And I am beginning to have massive issues, emotional issues with depression, anxiety, and actual recognition of abandonment, which I find it intriguing that I'm just now understanding and realizing that I experienced abandonment. And I'm not exactly sure why. I think I matured very slowly as a child. But all of that said, there was a lot of time spent at home alone. The television was my security. And so now that I am all these many years married, and my husband is now driving, and he's gone a lot on the road. And what has happened is this has really triggered me, in addition to a couple of other things. I've got some medical issues going on, but I'm triggered by the time that he is away from our home, and I'm just completely alone again because children are out of the house, living their lives, and I'm very grateful, and I'm very blessed. I am a Christian, but I am absolutely struggling. So all that said, I need help, and I'm struggling to know who to go to. I'm having major issues with trust, like never before.
I would imagine that you might not have gotten professional help previously because you're just now becoming aware of these emotions inside you. Is that right?
I've tried getting help off and on through the years for many reasons, but it always comes back to depression, anxiety, and I'm just now cognizant of the fact that I literally did, or actually was impacted by abandonment. And I'm wondering, how is it possible for me to have never understood that before? I've had people ask me in the past with different therapists and counselors, do you feel abandoned? And I would look at them with a strange look on my face and say, abandoned? No, I was never abandoned. But now, all of a sudden, I'm beginning to realize that, yes, I was absolutely abandoned. And I picked up on some of the conversation earlier in the show. There was talk about being able to watch parents and observe their behaviors, things like that. And I'm realizing I didn't get to do that. There was no observation of anything. There was no family life for me.
Our heart and souls are so complex, and our emotions do strange things. And sometimes to survive the pain in childhood, we repress the feelings and busy ourselves. So there was probably digital coping going on for you, even though you didn't know to call it that, where maybe your time on screen, as it does, it helps us to escape the emotions we were feeling. And then life got busy with school and marriage and children. But now that the environment is so similar to what it was like as a child, those old emotions are now coming to the surface. And I find that God tries to compel us and invite us to do some of the old work with the current pain that we feel, because he wants to redeem even our past. And so the strange, unexpected feelings that are coming up, it makes so much sense you're feeling it now as your husband is gone, your home is empty. And so it's an invitation to process this pain you're aware of now, but it's probably been in your body all this time.
Marc, how would you answer this?
So Kay, we all have blind spots. There's a lot of things that happen in the subconscious and in the unconscious, and sometimes other people can see those things in our lives, and it sounds like others were able to see that in you, and they were able to ask you that question, hey, have you ever felt abandoned? Because they could notice something, and in that moment you couldn't see it, but now something major has happened. And your husband's not actually leaving you. He's not actually abandoning you, but now it's got so big. Now your kids have gone and they're out of the house. It's become so evident that there's this feeling of loss and abandonment that's happening for you. And so now the scales have dropped from your eyes and you're able to see it. And so, I think now you can go into therapy with really a new lens on this. And so anxiety and depression, those are flowing from this underlying wounding. And so some therapists will deal with the thing that's on the surface. They'll teach you what we might call coping skills. And coping skills aren't bad to deal with depression and anxiety. But until we deal with the underlying thing, that's the root. We may continue to have those things just on a lower level. And so now I think that you can go into seeking professional help by letting that person take a historic view of what's happened to you. So I recommend going to see somebody who does take an attachment-based approach where you can start to tell your story and process through your story. And as you do that, you might find that your therapist then, with your new lens that you have going on, will start to point things out, and you'll start to make these connections like, oh yeah, that did happen to me. Oh yeah, that happens to me right now. Because I find that people who have abandonments, they have a lot of perceived abandonments that happen in the present, just like, your husband leaving to go on his job, but it also could be somebody turning their back to you. or not looking up when you go to the counter at a store, that you start to feel this abandonment and this rejection. And so as you develop something called the observing self, that piece of us that is able to kind of start to ask these questions. What am I feeling? Where does that come from? Why did that just happen? As you develop that piece of you, that observing self, you'll start to be able to see what's happening, and then you'll be able to learn how to cope with that in the moment.
I love that. Kay, we're going to send you a copy of How We Love, which will talk about some of the things that Marc is mentioning, but also I want to invite you to join us at Emotional Freedom Online March 16th, because I think group work could be a very powerful thing in this experience of just uncovering. And there's a lot of grief that comes up when we look back at our childhood, but we can resolve that and live full and free into the future. We're so glad that you called, Kay. We'll be back after this.
About 4 years ago is when I discovered my husband's addiction. I heard about New Life. It has been life-changing for me and for my husband both. It was direction when we were lost, and it was hope when we had none. The help that we received from New Life has been multifaceted. My husband did the Every Man's Battle workshop. We did the marriage weekend. We are avid listeners of the radio and TV programs, and I think those are awesome, wonderful resources. And I think the people who support New Life financially are people that I'll never know. I'll never be able to thank them personally for the gift that they gave to us. I believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that their giving saved me, my husband, and our family from being torn apart.
To make your tax-deductible gift, visit newlife.com and click Donate. Call 1-800-NEW-LIFE or text NLM to 28950. That's NLM to 28950. Daniel Grossman on coaching.
Coaches are really focused on the future and helping people to develop those skills and those strategies to help them move forward in their life. A coach really partners with you to focus on things like personal growth or health goals, spiritual growth, helping you develop in your career, or possibly strengthening your relationships, or maybe even breaking free from a negative pattern.
If you need a coach for life, your career, relationships, your health and fitness, leadership, and more, call New Life today and ask about the New Life Coaching Network. Our coaches have been trained and screened with the same intensive process we use for our network counselors.
Coaches use different techniques. Some like to use strategic questions and accountability, ultimately empowering you to take those next steps toward your goals.
Take control of your life and take action to achieve your goals. Call 1-800-NEW-LIFE and talk to us about getting a New Life coach today.
I really believe that everyone can use a coach in their corner.
1-800-NEW-LIFE. We'd love to hear from you. If you have a question or a comment, call toll-free 1-800-229-3000. Now back to New Life Live.
Welcome back. I'm trying to, we're going to go back to Kay for just a minute because we weren't done, because there's always more to the story. And so Kay, you had a question that you wanted to follow up on.
Yes, I did. It was suggested to me by a psychiatrist to try TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation. And several treatments in, I began to develop a very strong sense of anger, and in addition to that, just absolute rage. And I've heard of this, what's the word? It's not disassociation, but dysregulation in your head. And I don't know in terms of my left and right brain and how that TMS may have created this rage within me and caused me to be dysregulated. I don't know. I just thought that this is an interesting piece that you might want to know about.
Okay, I have heard of that surprising anger coming up with folks that have gone through this form of treatment. And as you know, but for the folks listening, it's when an electromagnetic pulse is sent to particular parts of the brain. And it's to kind of revive activity when activity is low in those parts of the brain. And there are two things to consider. It may have been an unintended byproduct of the treatment, But what I have found is that it's often revealing an anger within you that has actually been suppressed. And so you may very well have had anger that you weren't connected with, you weren't aware of, didn't know how to manage, or wasn't safe to feel it. So it may be an anger that was already there that is just being revealed to you because those parts of your brain are kind of being brought back to life when the brain can shut those parts down, again, to survive. So what we would recommend you do is you've got to take this trust issue into counseling, which is the hardest place to take it because you have reason not to trust counseling because of what you experienced before. And so I'd have you start with that as a primary issue and even interview our counselors that we'll recommend for you. Interview them ahead of time to say, listen, I'm coming in already not trusting treatment, because you have to work through those therapy interfering symptoms in order for therapy to be helpful for you. So you got a tough road ahead, but it is doable and you can have breakthrough. You have to not give up even when you don't trust the counseling that you're receiving.
I love that. Marc, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I just kind of affirm what Alice was saying. I had a client and the same thing happened to her. And of course, the person who was doing the TMS, a psychologist, recommended that she talk through the anger in therapy with me. And that was, and it really was just part of what was happening in the treatment and what was coming up. And so that's what I recommend for you is to talk with the provider about what is happening with you, and then to bring that into talk therapy with a counselor.
Yeah, it's a very common occurrence, and we tell people all the time about your therapeutic experience. You are able to say to the therapist, these kind of things bug me, or I'm expecting this, or this has been my experience before. And it's so helpful to the therapist to hear what your experience or what you're expecting, because it gives us insight into how you are dealing with whatever you're bringing into the room and or taking home with you. So we're glad that you explored that even further with SK, and we're grateful that you called. We're going to go back to the calls, and we're going to talk with Jessica, who's calling us from Oklahoma City, watches us on YouTube, and we're grateful for our YouTube family. Subscribe there and hit that like button. It helps other people know about us. Jessica, how can we help you today?
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I'm going to start out by telling you that I'm really kind of in shock and feel kind of stuck. I've been married for 10 years, and 3 weeks ago my husband came to me and said that he no longer wanted to be married, and he just left. And I haven't heard from him, and I'm not really sure what to do next. You know, I want my marriage. I want to say that I wish he would talk to me, but right now he's not answering. And I just don't know what to do.
Jessica, is there anybody in his family who you've talked to or you've checked in with? I mean, it's just really kind of frightening that he would just take off and there's no communication.
I could call his mom, but I'm just embarrassed. Like, what do I say? Like, I don't want to have to explain it. You know, he left and he's not calling. And so I could call her, and I've thought about it, but I just feel so embarrassed, and I'm just in shock in some ways.
That's so sad. Marc, how would you help Jessica with this?
Yeah, so Jessica, you had no indication whatsoever when this happened.
No, there's been just minor things that come up, regular things that you go through in your marriage, miscommunications, but no idea that he would just want to leave.
So you came home one day and he was gone, or he told you that he was leaving and then packed up his stuff?
He told me he was leaving and then left.
Okay, and then one more quick question. Is your husband depressed? Does he seem down?
Recently, he, when I look back, he was down a little bit, but nothing where I thought he would just leave. Nothing at all that I can think of.
Okay. All right. Well, we're coming up against a break here, and we're going to get back with you just after that.
Yes, we are. We're grateful that you called, Jessica. It's very upsetting when these things happen to us. How can we move forward? We will get some answers after this break.
For For most of my life, I've been dealing with an opiate addiction.
Why is opioid addiction quickly becoming one of our nation's biggest killers? Maybe it's because it isn't only those who are addicted who are in denial.
We did what I see so many parents do, is it can't be an addiction. There's something medically wrong.
It's impossible to solve a problem when you don't know what you're up against, and families will try to find any explanation except the one that will put them on the right path.
Alcoholism and drug addiction is a family disease. It doesn't affect just the individual.
If someone you love is abusing painkillers, know what you're up against. It's time to admit it's addiction and seek treatment. Call us today at 1-800-NEW-LIFE. We have Christ-centered partner treatment centers around the country. Call 1-800-639-5433 or visit us online at newlife.com.
We just made a decision. We will do whatever it takes.
1-800-NEW-LIFE.
I was sort of vaguely familiar that the 12 steps had some origination in the Bible. I found Life Recovery, and one of the things I liked so much was that it had such a broad appeal. It wasn't limited to just alcohol or drugs, that it was addressing a wide range of problems.
At New Life, we believe everyone can benefit from a life recovery experience. There are life recovery groups all over the country. They take place online, in conference calls, and in person. And if there isn't one in your area, we can help you start one. We have startup materials, leaders' guides, CDs, Bibles, and more, all with discounts available for groups. Call us at 1-800-NEW-LIFE and ask for Terry Ward. The 12 Steps have long been a great help to people in recovery because much of the 12 Steps' power comes from the fact that they capture principles clearly revealed in the Bible.
The 12 steps is really a pattern for all of us as Christians.
Call 1-800-NEW-LIFE. That's 1-800-639-5433. We're glad you joined us for New Life Live. To be a part of the program, call 1-800-229-3000. Now back to New Life Live.
Welcome back. Just a reminder that a new episode of the Every Man's Battle podcast dropped today. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. We're just grateful that JJ West and Doug Barnes host that program, and it's so insightful for so many reasons. We are talking with Jessica right now, and it's a very upsetting situation. Her husband of 10 years left, and it's pretty overwhelming because she hasn't heard from him, doesn't know what to do. And so, Marc, you had asked some really good questions, but let's go back into the conversation.
Yeah, so Jessica, I was asking you about if your husband seemed down or depressed, because I wanted to rule that out, because there's two things that I find when people just kind of drop off the face of the map. It's one, if that person's in a highly depressed state, and they just can't cope anymore and they want to end their lives. But for somebody to leave a relationship with little to no indication, I'm wondering if your husband might be having an affair. And that's typically why men might want to cut something off and go to the new thing. And I know that might be very, very difficult for you to hear. But you're only going to find that out by starting to do a little bit of investigation, by reaching out to friends, reaching out to his family members, letting them know what's going on, and starting to ask some of those questions.
Jessica, you had said you'd be too embarrassed to contact his mom. Makes complete sense that you don't want to tell anybody about this. So I'm amazed at your courage talking with us. And that probably has to be primary of getting in contact with people who are there in your life with whom you can bypass your embarrassment. Because, girl, you need some social support around you. You need a sisterhood to circle the wagons around you, because this is devastating on so many different levels. And so getting connected with people you feel safe enough with to reveal what's going on. Your heart and soul need that. And I want to add a couple of things to this idea of self-protection, but I want to check in with you to see how you're doing so far with what you're hearing from us.
It just seems like, a lot. I'm just wondering, it kind of seems overwhelming. What do I even say when I reach out? Hey, my husband just left me. I don't even know what to say.
You got to decide with whom you feel safe enough to be honest first. So identify that person, and a mother-in-law may not be the person to start with. So you got to start with somebody who's probably a little bit safer to you and more accessible. Might be a girlfriend, might be a sister. so that you can practice revealing. And yes, I think you brutally, honestly share with them, my husband has left. I don't know why. I don't know what's happened. And it's by this awful step of practicing revealing what you're going through that you'll be able to get the emotional and the spiritual support that you desperately will need right now. You probably also need to take a couple of steps. I'm going to try to break this down to make it as simple as possible. Financially, you got to protect yourself because we don't know what your husband is doing. We don't know how he's spending your combined money. So you might need to make a phone call. Not might, you do. You need to make a phone call to an attorney to find out what your legal, what your financial rights are, and how to start that process to protect yourself, to protect your assets. And then let us connect you with emotional support, with a professional, with a counselor who can then help you walk through these steps. Because, of course, what we're telling you, it probably feels impossible to do what we're suggesting, but it will be necessary for your self-protection. As Marc was identifying some of the reasons why a person leaves so abruptly, I'd have to add substance use in there too. Mm-hmm. And there are some mental health disorders where very surprising, spontaneous behavior happens, such as bipolar disorder, where a person all of a sudden goes into a state where they make big, awful decisions that they would never make in a stable state of mind. So all of these might be reasons for you to consider, because if you see the clues of what we're suggesting, that also helps you to then decide how to protect yourself.
And I think in terms of you're asking particularly about what language to use, I think you just use the language that you're using with us. Sometimes it's not about overthinking it. It's about just saying the thoughts that are in your head. And so the thoughts that you just gave us here were, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not even really sure where to start here. And then you just say, this is the situation and I don't know what to do from here. And sometimes just saying those things, the other person then will either respond to that in an empathetic way, or they'll start to ask more questions to draw you out. But I think what the key thing, what Alice is saying, is find somebody who's going to be safe for you to do that.
Yeah, Jessica, we are going to send you a copy of Emotional Freedom, which I think can help with this process. But I also want to get you connected with a therapist, because these conversations that are really hard for you to have with people in your life could be had with a therapist, and you can kind of practice that way. To have to have shame and guilt about something that someone else has done is displaced, right? It's getting confused with a lot of the feelings that you're having about maybe whatever was going on in the relationship. And it's tough. It is, we feel the pain that you have. We also know that it's not a place that you want to land. Alice?
On a logistical level, Becky, I would also suggest, Jessica, that you check your husband's social media to see, is he still active? Is he still alive? Is he still talking to people? That would be one way to do it. If you have a location on his phone, I would check that, because he told you what was happening, but it's so hard to believe given his historical behavior. And I hate to make these further suggestions, but we had a family member go missing. We didn't have a warning beforehand when I was younger. And we made calls. We made a call to the police to report a missing person, because we didn't know, did they really leave on their own terms, or are they in a state of psychological distress and they're in danger? We called the police. We called local hospitals. We called the jails to find the person that was missing. We ended up finding them. They were alive, thank God. But these are just practical steps to take to try to figure out what state of mind and body is your husband in right now. And my goodness, Jessica, we'll be praying for you and your family.
Yes, we sure will. We sure will. We're so grateful that you called. You know, we've been doing this for a long time. And Steve has been on sabbatical, and we've missed him, but his wisdom continues to inspire us. Terry, let's roll that New Life moment.
I'm Steve Arterburn with a New Life moment. God is always our first and primary audience for confession, but He isn't our only audience. Scripture tells us also to confess our sins to fellow believers. This is an extremely important and beneficial aspect of spiritual growth and health if conducted wisely. First, let me say that this type of confession isn't an all-encompassing command. That is, it isn't spilling your guts to anyone and everyone nosy enough to listen. Never confess to anyone who isn't spiritually mature. Second, confession to fellow believers is an act of trust, and this makes you highly vulnerable. The person to whom you confess must be able to keep your confession confidential. If you can't trust your confidant, you shouldn't be confident with him. To be of value, confession must be honest and complete. You must feel safe in your selection of a confidant. Need help thinking through what to look for in a confidant for confession? Visit me, Steve Arterburn, at newlife.com, and thanks for listening to this New Life Moment.
That's a perfect follow-up of wisdom after hearing from Jessica, because it is such an important part of that, to choose a confidant, to be able to trust them and not trust everybody. And I know it's funny because Alice, you talk about confession all the time. And, you know, you talk about just the process of how it does help us move in our lives, but finding those trusted advisors or friends. I mean, there's, you know, it's the wisdom of many that can help us, but it's really can be difficult when we're in a vulnerable place like what Jessica was in. But I love what Steve had suggested there.
Well, when we make confessions to people that we're not being discerning about the person we're talking to and they're not trustworthy, it can be very disastrous and hurtful. And we've heard from so many folks who have said, well, it doesn't work. Confessing, telling my story, it doesn't work. It actually made things worse. And that can be true if we're not picky about the person that we're revealing our heart and our vulnerability to. We have to be very cautious.
That's so true. You know, but we want to encourage you to not be isolated and to find that connection with people. And it may be, like I had suggested for Jessica, maybe you start with a professional therapist. Maybe that's where you start, and you start to practice. What does that look like? But also, we encourage people to be part of group all the time, whether it is a 12-step group or one of our life recovery groups that, you know, we do 12 steps there, but we also have them for codependency and all kinds of things where we just are learning the power of connection. I know a lot of people get a little freaked out when they think about whether it is group Bible study or a counseling group. But boy, I tell you, over and over again, we hear from folks who have participated in those groups. The power of the group has changed their lives. And we have many, many ways for you to connect with people in life's hardest places, because we want you to find that experience of connection and growth and healing, transformation. That's what we're all about.
And sometimes, Becky, a group is one of the safest places to share, because if everybody's got something to confess, you're all holding each other's confidentiality. And so that's where some of the trust can be rebuilt in others too, in that environment.
It's so true. If you want to be part of a group, give us a call at New Life, 1-800-NEW-LIFE, and we'll get you connected with one. If you've been to one of our intensives, join us in one of our Sustained Healing, Sustained Victory groups. It'll change your life.
We all face days where life throws us a curveball and our routines or plans get disrupted. Things we wanted to do are forced to take a backseat to the unexpected demands of the day. If you normally listen to New Life Live on a radio station, well, you might not be able to that day. And on these hectic days when you're feeling stressed or frazzled, hearing the sound of counsel given on New Life Live is just what you need to navigate the unexpected things of life.
Every time I'm troubled or I have a problem, I'll cut on New Life, and there's always something that is said that is helpful to me.
By listening, I have learned more than I can ever express about how God wants me to live.
Download the New Life app for the easiest way to listen wherever you are and at a time that's convenient for you, or watch the show on our YouTube channel. You can even subscribe to our podcast from your favorite podcast provider. You never have to miss a day of New Life. Wherever you are, we are.
Hi, this is Steve Arterburn, and for over 34 years, New Life has been the most trusted name in Christian counseling.
Your ministry has saved my life.
If you struggle with emotional hurt, family or marriage problems, the pit of depression, or the pain of addictions, we can help.
I'm down 100 pounds now from what I was.
Our treatment programs provide clinically appropriate solutions from licensed professionals, all in a biblical framework.
I have had problems with alcohol. I think God has ordained this place to be His.
You don't have to be a prisoner of your pain. Help is available at 1-800-NEW-LIFE.
She tells me that I'm a new man, and I feel like a new man.
It worked for me, and it can work for them too.
This time it is different.
If you're ready to take the first step towards genuine spiritual and emotional healing, call us today at 1-800-NEW-LIFE. God can open the door to a better tomorrow. Call 1-800-639-5433.
To find out more information about New Life or to order any of the resources mentioned on today's program, call 1-800-NEW-LIFE. Now back to New Life Live.
Welcome back. We really want you to experience transformation. That's why we do our intensives. That's why we have our resources, our articles, our tip sheets, our counselors, our coaches. I could, list them all. But the bottom line is that we're here for you. We want you to know that you have good resources that are both biblically sound and psychologically sound. We want to help you get there. And so, we have discounts for our Club New Life members. If you want to be part of Club New Life, it's an ongoing support. We suggest that we want you to be part of that. But also, if you have not yet attended an intensive, but you've been thinking about it, call us and just get curious about it. Mm-hmm. You never know how that will change your life. We've been doing this for 35 years, and that's why we can bring you our flashback calls. And today we've got one from Rhonda. So let's listen in.
Let's talk to Rhonda from Stewart's Draft, Virginia. How do you say that?
That's right. It's Stewart's Draft.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks for calling us. Thanks for listening.
Hi. I'm glad you took my call. My son is 14.
Yeah.
And for the last 7 months, he's been at a boys' school for actually some juvenile behaviors and has been diagnosed with ODD and some mild ADHD. But I guess my question is, today I got a call from the school, and he had some sexual acting out behaviors with another boy there. My understanding is my son was the one who initiated, and I think it had been going on for maybe like 3 weeks intermittently, and he did own up to it. But I guess my question is, at his age, is it kind of normal for an adolescent boy to experiment in that way, especially with boys, or people of his own sex?
And how old is he?
He's 14.
14. Well, of course, experimentation is normal. I mean, it's normal because a lot of kids do it. The question, though, now that pornography is involved with this, the question would be a 14-year-old boy looking at, and was it same-sex pornography? Do you know?
No. Actually, it was boy to boy. There was no pornography involved.
All right. Well, a 14-year-old.
We don't have like computer at home or TV or any of that stuff, and so he really, as far as I know, unless he's been to another friend's house or something, but I guess it was
here's
sexual
the answer.
Experimentation between him and
yes,
another boy.
A lot of 14-year-olds experiment with some homosexual behavior, and it just goes away, and it was just something that happened. But the question you have to determine whether or not this was that or it was the beginning of something. If it, a lot of times when we think of a 14-year-old, in actuality, emotionally, maybe they're at a 16-year-old stage. So it really depends on the child. And if I were you, I would probably want to get him a little bit of counseling, maybe with you or whatever, because I just would hate to assume it was just all innocent and everything, when in reality this is something he's really struggling with, and you'd want to know that early on and get involved and get to work on it.
When the school that he's currently attending, the boys program, there is a gentleman there who does individial counseling with boys about, sexual identity and things like that.
Well, I think that'd be great if he, he's going to be able to determine if this is a problem or not much better than we are over radio.
I see.
But I can answer the question that, yes, that frequently happens, and it doesn't develop into anything problematic. But you just don't know what it really is, what it means, until you or someone else gets close and finds out. So I hope that that's helpful to you. I'm going to send you Every Young Man's Battle, and there is a section in there on what if you're attracted to someone of the same sex. And I think that could be, hopefully it will be, helpful to you.
You know, it's so problematic when we have the way that she described her son. He was already had a history of some challenges. And so the behavior, which is concerning to her, you know, it does have to be addressed like Steve was talking about. Marc or Alice, what would you add to that?
This question is becoming more and more pertinent with things that are taking place in our culture, because in the name of tolerance and acceptance and loving well, I think that a sexual agenda is being promoted to our children, that it is good to experiment and that you should be open to the fact that you might have homosexual desires, and that's okay, that's good, you should test them out. I'm seeing evidence of this being promoted, not just we should be tolerant and loving of one another, but actually go ahead and try all this out to figure out what you like best. It's in sex education material, some of which is even mandated by certain states. Here in California, there's a mandated sex education that promotes this and teaches children to experiment with all different sorts of sexual behavior. It's going into a lot of our graphic novels that are being made available to our elementary school kids, our middle school children, and it is hard to find out which books are safe and clean and which ones are LGBTQ friendly, which I think often end up promoting rather than just teaching tolerance and acceptance. And lastly, in a lot of children's cartoons, children are being taught this is an option and you can sure try it if you want to.
Well, and I think what can be confusing for kids too is the fact of being confused is often celebrated in society without actually giving any kind of direction to it. And so we kind of leave kids out there in the ocean and we're on the side in a lifeboat, and instead of pulling them in, we just kind of throw them a life ring and say, okay, just keep yourself afloat here. But when we feel confused, we need clarity. We need to be able to talk that out with somebody to be able to figure out where are some of those desires coming from. And we need safe places to do that with. And so I would say if you have a kid who's confused, lead them somewhere where they can get some clarity.
And ask your children regularly what they're learning, what they're thinking about, and ask direct questions regarding sex. What are you hearing about? Are kids at school talking about masturbation? Are they talking about homosexuality? What's going on in your peer group? And checking on all this material and content that I was listing out, we parents have to be wary and be so involved in our children's life so that we're both teaching what are our faith standards and we're finding out how are our children being influenced.
And not just lectures, it's asking good questions to draw them out, because if you're just talking and your kid's silent, probably not a lot is getting in.
They're tuning you out.
So, exactly. And it's through the thoughtful questions that you ask is how you'll draw them out and find out more information to help lead them in a good and safe direction.
A good plan will precede the questions where you're actually teaching them about feelings, thoughts, behaviors, what's typical in sexual development. And those don't have to be lectures. Those can be 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and then ask the questions. It's a constant conversation. In this situation, you had an acting out situation where a child is in a restricted environment because of previous behavior. So it's complex. It's all of the things that you guys are talking about and more. But, as we're raising people, because they are people, I know they start as children, but they're people. They have thoughts, they have feelings, they have desires that are all part of God's design for them. And we can speak directly into how God sees them and how he loves them. And, it's amazing what he does in our lives. Thank you, Marc. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, listeners. We will see you next time. If you need anything, call us, 1-800-NEW-LIFE. We are there for you. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks for listening. We hope this program has helped you by giving you insights for handling the challenges you face in your life. We want you to know that we're here for you, but you also need to know that New Life Live is a listener-supported ministry. To make your donation or to get any of the resources mentioned on today's program, call 1-800-NEW-LIFE. That's 1-800-639-5433, or write to us at New Life Ministries, P.O. Box 1029, Lake Forest, California, 92609. Please join us again tomorrow for New Life Live.
Thanks for watching today. We love helping people. I hope you sense that. And we know that there's always hope if you find the right resource. Now, if something we've said to somebody else applies to you, that's fantastic. That's what we're hoping for. But also, if you want to join us directly, you can call 1-800-229-3000 between 1 and 3 Eastern Time, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays. Those are the best times to get through. And while you're here on YouTube, check out these other videos that we've done to help people see where they could grow or a different path to take. And if you do that, would you give us a thumbs up on the video? And please subscribe to this channel. There are many ways that we can help you outside of the radio program, and it's very hard for some to pick up a phone and dial 1-800-NEW-LIFE. But when you do, we put you in touch with somebody who cares about you, knows all the resources out there, and they're going to find the best for you. There is no reason to struggle alone. I hope to see you tomorrow. Hope you'll invite somebody else to come and join that maybe needs just a little bit of help along the way. I'll see you next time.